I'm sure we've all heard this notion that by letting go, we create space for new things to arrive or to arise. Yeah. Um, and so that may not be anything new, right? And it's no great revelation. You let go of old clothes, and then somehow, um, all of a sudden, you get a bonus, and all of a sudden, you go shopping, and now there's space for new things. Our lives are like that, and I think part of what we're looking at here, also in these transitions into not just a new year, but kind of as we consider the path that we're on, and what is it that we are seeking to relinquish. So much like we did in the purification breathing, we may not know exactly all the many lists of things that are, part of the things we don't like, part of the things we're clinging to, and then the things we're confused about. We don't have to when we're doing that practice. And yet there's also a part of this cultivation where the acknowledgement of what we can call the dissolution of certain aspects of life that don't serve us any longer. If we know what those things are, can feel like a sense of loss. But that's only one part of us experiencing it that way. Yeah, the sense of ego, of clinging, of identification, even with things that are difficult. Rather, thinking of letting go not as loss, but as freedom. Yeah, as a lightening up that makes space for new experiences. And as part of that, we're also talking about dissolution of barriers, of obstacles between ourselves and others, of getting more intimate with life in general. And that can be something that's a process over time. We can't just necessarily snap our fingers. And this is especially true if someone has a history of trauma or other kinds of things in life that have, real adversity that has changed one's life. So what is it that's being let go of? Certainly not the important parts of who we are as a result of these experiences. We grow into a new way of being. This notion that this term resilience, yeah, is a bouncing back after a difficult experience is a little bit of misleading, because most of the time we can't bounce back to a normal because the normal is different. Yeah. So rather, it's a looking forward, it's a looking ahead, it's an investment of life, energy, and vitality. The healing maybe is already happening or has happened, and the making space requires a certain amount of equanimity, don't you think? Equanimity here, stability, evenness of mind. When we were doing the mountain, the earth element, the mountain, we were in some ways, and we've done this before on Sunday nights, the mountain meditation, where we are becoming like a mountain. We are becoming unmoved and solid and rooted deeply as the weather patterns around the mountain shift and change, and the snow comes, covers the mountain with a blanket of winter, and then the spring comes, and it's a lovely practice. The snow melts and turns into these kind of cascades of waterfalls and things. The sun travels across the sky. The night comes, the moon around. All the while, mountain remains unmoved and present. Yeah, it's a lovely practice. If you're all sort of like, yeah, let's do it, we can do it. Otherwise, we'll do something different. But the point here is that part of dissolution comes with equanimity, meaning that what we're letting go of is not any more important than what we are creating. Yeah, but it can feel that way. Part of that experiencing letting go is loss. But the other thing that equanimity allows for is this sense um, of a brightness of mind, of a more clear path. This is the meaning to clear path meditation, our little group name. But it is really that which arises out of equanimity. As we know, when we practice and the mind settles into a still kind of sort of a still focused abiding, that that sense of equanimity, no preference for one thing over another, for one thought over another, for one feeling over another. These things just keep changing anyway. So the second we have a preference, we end up being disappointed at some point. Yeah. That's different than aspiration. So attachment, aspiration, not the same thing. Aspiration here is that which we are truly devoted to authentically. What are we wanting, as we mentioned earlier, to bring into the world? How do we want to show up? And as Marie said earlier, why? Yeah, the how and the why. Playing, dancing with each other. And ultimately, we're talking about creating a space that others experience. What does that look like? So there's the what, the how, why, and the what. Right, Marie? So just a word about Maitreya, the Buddha of becoming. Often he's referred to as the Buddha of becoming, and there are various texts also that are preserved in the Chinese, in the ancient Chinese texts, about the significance of Maitreya. Through the ages, that one day the Buddha will return in this form, in almost a soteriological, we call in Divinity School, a soteriological sense, meaning that that salvation is still many, many eons away from us, but that the Buddha Maitreya is there to bring deep love and compassion, and kind of, in that sense, almost a salvific quality to us. And interestingly, this notion of Buddha Maitreya speaks directly, I think, to path, because there are many people now who see Maitreya Buddha as a reflection of the potential within us, yeah, as communities. That the future Buddha, or the Buddha of becoming, is really going to be in the form of a community that makes a radical difference, a shift for humanity. And yet, that's going to take many of us on a path, right, to cultivate this. It's not just going to sort of happen on its own. Now, this depends. Other traditions say, no, we just need to keep Dharma practice going, keep meditating. Maitreya will arise when the causes and the conditions are ripe. I feel as if this is a task that we're called to do. We are called to cultivate for a reason. And so one of the questions then here is has to do with how we see past, present, and future. After all, the future is utterly uncertain, right? We really don't know. This is a characteristic of any path, is that the way ahead is often unknown. And there will always be a certain amount of uncertainty and mystery in where we are all headed, not just in our own lives, but collectively as well. Hindsight is clearer. Yeah, we can always look back and see, this is what was going on. This is where we are headed. But it's not always clear where we are in the moment and where we are headed. And so in that sense, what we trust matters, what we put our faith into. Yeah. And in the Vajrayana tradition, in the tantric tradition, basically everything is the path, including our difficulties. So as I mentioned earlier, if we think about past, present, and future, of course, we're thinking of it in a linear way. But the truth is that the linear time is only one dimension, yeah, of multiple realities. Uh-oh, he's getting a little philosophical on us here. But the truth is, we do live in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And we don't have to go into quantum mechanics to sort of flesh all of this out. Because we carry within ourselves our histories, we carry where we are now, and we carry, in some respects, the future in one moment. All of these are part of our experience in some way, even if it's simply relating to uncertainty about the future. So, how do we practice with this? And how do we sort of move into this new year by being dedicated to the path, not just a practice, but really seeing our lives as being a path itself? You know? As I said at the beginning, we would not be here together in this call if we were not on a path. Curiosity even is simply a path. So this Buddha of becoming, Maitreya Buddha, Maitreya, Maitri, so Maitreya is from the root Maitri, which is loving kindness. Yeah? Maitri is the Sanskrit word for loving kindness. In the Pali language, it's metta. So if you've heard metta, it's the same word. The metta is the Pali, Maitri is the Sanskrit. And this path of Maitreya, this process of becoming that we are both individually and collectively, is a process of seeking and growing through the heart. And in that sense, it does involve community. It's fundamentally relational. Thich Nhat Hanh says I think it's from the 3 earth touchings. Those of you who were on our retreat last spring might remember this. He says, at this very moment, I am present everywhere. I am also present in the past, and I am present in the future. Well, I'm sure that's true now, but when he said this, he was still alive. He's not talking about necessarily. He's not necessarily talking so much about this kind of hugely metaphysical reality. Maybe he was, but he's talking about the fact that all of these dimensions are with us. And many mindfulness teachings, meditation teachings seek to have us just forget the past. It's gone. Don't worry about the future, but be fully present. And yes, that's true. And yet we can't necessarily deny that where we've come from, nor sort of forsake a path that is leading someplace, however uncertain it may be. So how do we work with these elements? And this is why my question for you, and you may not have an answer now, but a point of reflection. What do you need going forward into this new year on your path? Here when we practice together, I like to think of it that we are part of this thing called the jeweled net. Yeah, that somehow when we practice, and even when we don't practice, that there is some idea that, yes, there is a community here. And whether people show up every week or they're part of numerous other communities, so much the better. But this jeweled net is that we are all sort of relying on each other, we are interdependent, and we are also feeding each other as well in very good ways, because we really wish the best for each other. Imagine if the entire world was our jeweled net, and maybe it can be. Maybe this is the aspiration. So how do we practice with past, yeah? Processing, healing, old wounds and traumas requires recognition. It requires, but it requires us not reliving them so much as fully immersing ourselves in the present and looking back with sort of from a different vantage point, with the vantage point of this heart of cultivation that we've been growing. And so, as part of that, We want to continue the work of composting, if you will, that which doesn't serve us anymore. What no longer is serving us can be continued to be metabolized and supported by the practice, however, whatever that looks like for us. The present, of course, is where we seek to practice. We want to find that refuge, that, as we called it earlier, proprioception. It's being in a body, in a place, in a space, roots us, opens the senses, and awakens kind of the present moment that we've otherwise been missing. And from here, cultivating this sense of spacious awareness, that we can then turn that lens back onto our history with a much more profound degree of compassion than we've ever had for ourselves before. And then the future. What things do we want to unfold? Aspiration doesn't have to be attachment, as I said earlier. What vision do you have? Do you have the energy for one at all? What things do you want to unfold, and what do you need going forward? So again, in Vajrayana, all things are the path. Even when we don't feel like we're on it, we're still there. Now, we don't also want to get ensnared in living up to expectations that feel daunting. Yeah. This last year, we've gone through something like 8 weeks of Longchenpa's freedom attending reality. We've gone through many different sort of cycles of practice, and there's always this ideal of what we're practicing. But I think when it comes to path, and certainly the Buddhist tradition really wants to drive this home, it's really not about even accomplishment, but it's about your motivation. It's about every day attuning yourself back into intention, motivation, and aspiration for yourselves and others. It may be cliche, and you may be hearing me saying this going, oh my God, how many more times is he going to say that today? But it is true, that being cognizant of that motivation matters. These are the seeds, after all, that will lead to this Buddha of becoming, this community of change, this evolution among our humanity. But we also have to see that we too embody this Buddha nature, that we too are bringing this quality of bright, each and every one of us equally, this heart of wisdom and of abiding unconditional compassion and love and skillfulness. So if that's our future, if that's our path going forward, despite the uncertainty and despite the unknowns, maybe the mystery itself can be a lot more fun